In the Eastern Orthodox tradition, on Good Friday, to mark the day Jesus died, a woven tapestry is brought out, carried as if being taken from a tomb. This tradition goes back more than 1,000 years. Each tapestry is different, yet each one bears the image of Jesus laid out on a burial cloth, the body banked with flowers. The similarity to the shroud is unmistakable. Many say that this tradition of placing flowers around an image of Jesus in his shroud goes back to the very beginnings of the Christian church. In recent years, subtle images of flowers have been discovered on the shroud itself. This area of research has been vigorously pursued by Dr. Alan Wanger of Duke University and his wife, Mary. Wanger developed the hypothesis that certain off-body images on the shroud were impressions of flowers. He came to this research from the work of German physicist Oswald Scherman.
He noticed these, but I didn't see what he was talking about at first, but later on I noticed the image of a flower very closely resembling a chrysanthemum. And as I backed off and looked around, I began seeing many of these images on the shroud. Obviously, these were banked in around the body at the time of burial.
The purpose of the flowers is not known. Perhaps as a fumigant, since the body was hastily buried, or perhaps just to honor the dead.
And by studying the shroud very carefully, we feel that we identified actually 28 of these flowers on the shroud.
Wanger studied details on the shroud, comparing them with life-size photographs of the corresponding plants they resemble in the field.
In addition, we were able to determine the flowering time of these, and all of these flowers bloom in either March or April, which indicate that this was the time of Passover, the time of crucifixion.
Many of the plants recognized by the Wangers seem to be native to the Jerusalem area. They showed their findings to Israel's leading botanist, Avinoam Danin.
Using details of plant morphology, I was rather happy to confirm their observations. Then I looked more and more, and altogether I marked here about 12 or 13 objects, botanical objects, that I observed on the shroud.
One of the plants, Zygophyllum dumosum, was the key evidence for botanist Danin. Not only did he see its image on the cloth, but he found even more precise details than had the Wangers. Did this plant once lay on the Shroud of Turin?
We can see here the image of Zygophyllum dumosum. The winter leaf looks like that. This is the petiole.
Zygophyllum dumosum grows in only one place in the world, a small area near Jerusalem.
The 4 leaves I found is so clear that I can state that the stem of Zygophyllum dumosum was laid on the shroud in the spring. Additionally, I could say to you that it couldn't be that the shroud was made somewhere else. It had to be here.
If there were flowers around the body, there would also be pollen. Pollen can last thousands of years, and under the microscope, each type is distinctive. Clues too small for the naked eye, just waiting for the right detective. In 1973, the Swiss criminologist Max Frey was permitted to take samples of pollen from the weave of the shroud. He preserved them on glass slides. Trained as a botanist, he spent years analyzing their pollen content. He died before he could finish and publish his conclusions, but others have taken up the work. Using state-of-the-art technology, they can exactly identify each pollen grain and match it back to the plant. Uri Baruch is Israel's leading pollen expert. Working with Dr. Danin, He calculates the type and frequency of pollen on Fry's slides.
There in the back of my mind that there are also canopods that have the same pollen type. And we haven't met this one before. It's the first instance of this pollen type.
The goal is to determine exactly which plants surrounded the body and which were the most prevalent. Of the 58 pollen types identified so far, 28 of the plants exist only in the Middle East. Proof that the cloth spent part of its history there. Many are still part of the lives of the people of the region, like Fagonia mollis.
The leaves of Fagonia mollis are used by the Bedouin in southern Sinai to heal superficial wounds. They take the green stems and leaves and burn it. The powdered ash is used to put on the wound. They call it uraga.
There is another Gundelia right now, Avinoam.
The slides have revealed an unusually high density of pollen from a plant called Gundelia tourneforti. This particular sample came from an area next to the head of the man on the cloth.
You can see the spines, okay? Here one, here one, here one. And
the plant that left so much pollen in this spot on the shroud can be recognized by its flower, but it's better known for something else.
I have to use my knife because it's a highly spiny plant. This is Gundelia tourneforti, the thistle that has the highest frequency of pollen grains on the Shroud of Turin.